What if everything you thought you knew about me was a lie? Not a lie I told you, a lie I told myself. That I could build the future alone. That vision was enough. That rockets and companies could fill the space where another person's hand should have been. But somewhere in the middle of all that speed, I realized something that stopped me cold. I was running towards something I didn't even want if I had to run there alone. And that's when I finally understood what I'd been missing the whole time. I'm going to tell you something that will shock you. Behind closed doors, I'm not the visionary you think I am. I'm a man who's terrified of being abandoned. I'm a man who hides behind ambition because it's safer than being truly known. I'm a man who learned to optimize everything except the one thing that actually matters: how to love another person. This is not the story of a genius. This is the story of a man learning, maybe too late, that love is the only thing worth building for. I've spent my life moving forward so fast that I never had to look back at what I was leaving behind. But somewhere in the middle of all that speed, I realized something that stopped me cold. I was running towards something I didn't even want, if I had to run there alone. The future I've been building, it only means something if there's someone beside me who chose to stay, even when staying was the hardest thing to do. You've lived long enough to know what real means. You've waited for things that mattered. You've loved people who were difficult, distracted, driven by forces bigger than both of you. And maybe you've wondered if that kind of love was ever meant to work, if two people moving at different speeds could ever find the same rhythm. Here's what I need you to understand before anything else. I'm not the man the world sees. Behind closed doors, I'm the man who wonders if I've gotten it all wrong. I'm the man who builds empires because I don't know how to build a home. I'm the man who chose everything except the one thing that could have saved me. So let me ask you this, and please, hear me carefully. What if I'm finally ready to choose differently? I've learned something about myself that most people never discover, and it took me half a lifetime to see it clearly. Movement can feel like purpose, speed can feel like progress, and loneliness can feel like strength if you're busy enough not to notice it's destroying you from the inside. When you're building something that matters, really matters, something that could change how humans live or where they go or what they believe is possible, the world rewards your focus. Everyone tells you that the cost is worth it. Sacrifice your time, sacrifice your relationships, sacrifice the ordinary moments that feel small compared to the extraordinary vision you're chasing. And for a long time, I believed them. I believed that narrative so completely that I turned it into my identity. But here's what they don't tell you. Isolation has a weight. It's not like physical weight, where you can measure it and name it. It's quieter than that. It creeps into the spaces between your ambitions. It lives in the silence of a home that's just a place you sleep. It becomes the thing you're actually building toward, even when you thought you were building something else entirely. I remember sitting in my office at 2 a.m, not because there was something urgent that required my attention, but because staying there felt safer than going home to an empty room. Do you know what that does to a person? Do you understand how it shapes you when the thing you're most comfortable with is the thing that's slowly erasing you? The work was real, the mission was real, the impact is real. But the cost was a life lived mostly in parallel to other people instead of with them. I built relationships the same way I built companies, with systems, with efficiency, with the belief that if I could just optimize enough, I could make it work. But love doesn't work that way. Love requires something that can't be optimized. It requires presence. It requires choosing someone not because they fit your equation, but because they matter more than the equation itself. I think about the women who tried to love me and couldn't quite reach the part of me that actually lived behind the vision. I think about the moments I was physically present but completely absent. I think about the times I chose the problem that needed solving over the person who needed me, and I've had to sit with the deepest, most uncomfortable truth. I wasn't the victim of my ambition. I was hiding in it. Ambition can be a beautiful thing. It can move mountains. It can inspire millions. But it can also be the most perfect excuse for never having to be vulnerable with another person. As long as you're moving towards something big enough, no one expects you to stand still. No one expects you to simply be with someone in the quiet. No one expects you to admit that you're afraid, that you're lonely, that sometimes the thing you're running toward is less important than the person you might be running away from. That realization broke something open in me. It shattered the story I'd been telling myself about who I was and what was important. And in that breaking, I started to understand what I actually wanted. Not what I thought I should want, but what my heart had been asking for all along. A life with someone, not a life that accommodated someone when I had time. Not a life where another person fit into the margins of my ambition, but a life where I actually chose her over the next achievement, where I woke up and made the conscious decision that this person, this moment, this connection was worth more than any rocket or company or vision of the future I could ever create. Do you know what that costs? Not in money or time, but in the deepest part of your identity? It costs the story you've been telling yourself. It costs the protection of being too busy to fail at love. It costs the comfortable lie that you're serving something bigger by being unavailable for something intimate. It costs everything you've used to justify why you've never let yourself truly need another person. And yet, sitting here now, I would pay that cost 1,000 times over. There's a kind of waiting that most people don't understand unless they've done it themselves. It's not the waiting at an airport or a doctor's office, the kind where you're killing time until your real life starts again. I'm talking about the waiting that becomes your life, the waiting where you love someone who is somewhere else even when they're standing right in front of you. The waiting where you hold space for a person to become who they need to be, knowing that the becoming might never include you. I think you know this waiting. I think you've done it. Maybe you're still doing it. For years, I thought waiting was weakness. I thought it meant you weren't moving forward. I thought it meant you were stuck. But I was wrong about that, and the wrongness of it cost me more than I can measure. Waiting, real waiting, the kind where you choose to stay present with someone even when they can't stay present with you. That's not weakness. That's love in its truest form. That's faith when faith has no evidence to back it up. I've built things by understanding physics, by understanding how systems work, by understanding that if you apply enough force in the right direction you can move mountains. But I never learned the physics of human connection, and it's a different science entirely. It moves at its own speed, it follows its own laws, and sometimes it requires you to stop pushing and simply be still. When you're wired to move constantly, to solve problems, to optimize and iterate and improve, stillness feels like death. It feels like failure. It feels like you're wasting the one life you have. But what if stillness is actually where life happens? What if the most important thing you could ever do is simply show up, day after day, and let another person know that they matter more than your restlessness? I've watched people do this. I've seen women especially, strong women, creative women, women with their own visions and ambitions, choose to wait for men who were caught between two worlds, caught between the life they were building and the life they could have if they stopped running. And I've watched those women slowly disappear into the waiting. I've watched their own light dim because they were so busy holding space for someone else's future that they forgot to live their own present. That's when I started to understand something crucial. Waiting without a promise is not love, it's sacrifice. And there's a difference. Love asks you to wait, but it also asks the other person to turn around. It asks both of you to choose each other simultaneously. It's not one person standing still while another person runs past. It's both people deciding that the journey matters less than the companionship. But here's where it gets complicated. And I need to be honest about this because you deserve honesty. Sometimes the person you're waiting for doesn't turn around. Sometimes they keep running. Sometimes they convince themselves that the running is the point, that the achievement is the relationship, that they're too broken or too driven or too focused on something else to actually show up for love. And if you're the one waiting, you have to decide how long you're willing to hold that space before you let it go. I've thought about the women who waited for me and eventually walked away. I've thought about what they were really saying when they left. They weren't saying they didn't love me. They were saying that love wasn't enough if it wasn't returned with presence. They were saying that they deserved to be chosen, not accommodated. They were saying that my vision, as important as it might be, couldn't feed their soul the way a real relationship could. And they were right. There's a particular kind of pain in understanding that you hurt someone by being unavailable while simultaneously believing you were doing something noble by chasing the future. That pain is different from other kinds. It's the pain of recognizing that you cause damage not through malice, but through absence, through the slow erosion of attention, through the message, sent again and again, that something else mattered more. I think about what I would tell those women now if I could. I would tell them that their waiting wasn't in vain, even though it ended. I would tell them that the fact that they could wait, that they could love someone who couldn't quite love them back in the way they needed, that says something profound about their capacity for grace. But I would also tell them that they were right to leave. They were right to stop waiting. They were right to choose themselves. That's the lesson I needed to learn. That real love isn't about how long you can wait. It's about whether both people are willing to stop running and actually arrive at the same place at the same time. Now I'm thinking about what it would mean to make that arrival. What it would mean to stop moving long enough to let someone really see me. What it would mean to build something with another person that's not more important than the person themselves. What it would mean to wake up every day and say, not with words, but with actual presence, you are the future I'm building for. That's a different kind of ambition. That's the kind that scares me more than failure ever could. Fear is a strange thing when you've spent your whole life teaching yourself not to feel it. You learn to reframe it as risk. You learn to call it challenge. You learn to convert it into fuel. And after a while, you become so good at transmuting fear into forward motion that you forget what the original fear actually was. But it never goes away. It just gets buried deeper, waiting for the moment when you finally stand still long enough to hear it. The fear I'm talking about now is different from the fear of failure. That fear I understand. I've looked it in the face 1,000 times. I've bet everything on ideas that could have collapsed completely. I've made decisions that could have ruined me. And that kind of fear, the fear of external collapse, that's manageable because you can control so many of the variables. You can work harder. You can be smarter. You can outthink your competitors. You can force reality to bend to your will if you're willing to pay the price in focus and sacrifice. But the fear of being truly known by another person, that's a fear you can't engineer your way out of. That's a fear that lives in the part of you that you've learned to hide. And it shows up when you finally let someone close enough to see behind the vision. I've spent my life building walls that look like ambition. I've hidden behind missions. I've used the importance of my work as a shield against intimacy. And it worked beautifully for a long time. As long as I was moving forward, as long as there was always another problem to solve, another mountain to climb, another version of the future to chase, I didn't have to face the fact that I'm afraid of being abandoned. That I'm afraid of not being enough just as a person, without the accomplishments. That I'm afraid of what happens when someone sees all of me and decides to leave anyway. That's the fear that stops men like me. Not the fear of the world rejecting us. We can handle that. We expect that. But the fear of one specific person, someone we actually let past the defenses, deciding that we're not worth the effort, that we're too broken, that we ask too much and give too little, that we love in the wrong language, speak in the wrong rhythm, move at the wrong speed. I think about what it would take to let someone past all of that, what it would take to say, out loud, in the quiet of an ordinary moment, I'm terrified. Not terrified of Mars or competition or failure, terrified of you. Terrified of what it means that you matter so much that your leaving could actually break me. Terrified of the vulnerability that comes with needing another person. Terrified of the fact that I can't control this the way I control everything else. Because here's the truth that took me so long to understand. Love is the one thing you can't optimize. You can't make it more efficient. You can't solve it with a better algorithm. You can't outthink it or outwork it or force it into submission. It requires something I've always resisted, which is surrender. It requires you to be willing to lose. It requires you to put the most important thing in someone else's hands and trust that they won't destroy it. And if you're someone like me, someone who has learned that the only way to survive is to be in control, that kind of trust feels like falling. It feels like death. It feels like every instinct you've developed over decades is screaming at you to pull back, to protect yourself, to return to the safety of being alone. But what if that instinct is wrong? What if the real death is the slow suffocation of living without connection? What if the safety you've built is actually a prison? What if all of this time you've spent protecting yourself is time you've spent dying? I'm at the age now where I can see both endings clearly. I can see the version of my life where I keep moving, keep building, keep running toward the next horizon. And I can see who I'll be at the end of that road. Accomplished, important, utterly alone. A man whose life changed the world but who never let anyone change him. A man whose name will be remembered, but whose heart will have spent the entire journey locked away. And then I can see the other ending, the one where I actually stop, where I let someone in completely, where I choose presence over achievement, not because I'm giving up on my vision, but because I'm adding something to it that's infinitely more valuable, where I build a life with someone instead of just building things while someone watches from the margins. That second ending requires something I've never been good at: vulnerability. It requires me to admit that the greatest achievement I could ever accomplish is not a company or a technology or a future on another planet. It's the ability to be genuinely close to another human being. It's the capacity to love someone and let them love me back in a way that's not contingent on performance or success or how many hours I worked that week. The fear comes from knowing that this ending is not guaranteed. I can't force it. I can't engineer it. I can't make it happen through sheer will. I can only show up, be honest about who I am, and hope that's enough. I can only say to the right person, I'm here now, I'm present, I'm choosing this, and I'm choosing you. And then I have to live with the possibility that she might say no, that she might have been hurt too many times by men who promised presence and delivered absence, that she might have decided the risk isn't worth it. That's the fear that keeps me awake at night. Not the fear of building the future, but the fear of losing the present because I waited too long to recognize its value. I've realized something else in my thinking about this. The women who have actually changed my understanding of what matters, they were never the ones who waited endlessly. They were the ones who loved fiercely but also loved themselves fiercely. They were the ones who said, I see you, and I love who you could be, but I won't disappear while you figure out how to get there. They were the ones who gave me time but not unlimited time. They were the ones who held boundaries even when I was used to everyone accommodating my needs. And in that firmness, in that refusal to diminish themselves for my journey, I finally saw what real love looks like. It's not about sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's ambition. It's about two people standing together and saying, your growth matters, and my growth matters, and we're going to find a way to make space for both. It's about honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable. It's about the courage to say no to protect what matters to you. I'm learning this late, and that fills me with a different kind of regret. Not the regret of roads not taken, I'm at peace with my choices, but the regret of how long it took me to see that the most important choice was the one I kept postponing. The choice to actually be present for another human being. The choice to let someone matter as much as my mission. The choice to build something with someone that's fragile and real and completely beyond my control. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I'll get this right. I don't know if I have the capacity to fully transform from the person I've been to the person I need to become. But what I do know is that the fear itself is telling me something important. It's telling me that this matters. It's telling me that this is worth being afraid about. And it's telling me that the greatest risk I've ever taken might not be the one that changes the world, but the one that changes my heart. There's a difference between building something and choosing something, and I've spent most of my life confusing the two. Building is about vision. It's about seeing what doesn't exist and making it real. It's about will and persistence and the ability to hold a future in your mind so clearly that you can bend present circumstances toward it. Choosing is different. Choosing is about recognition. It's about looking at what's already in front of you and deciding that it matters more than anything you could possibly create. I've built companies. I've built systems. I've built technologies that surprised even me with what they could do. But I've never really chosen a person. I've never said, with my whole life, not just with my words, you are my priority. I've never made decisions based on what would make someone else's life better, instead of what would advance my mission. And I think that's something I need to tell you, because if you're going to understand who I am now, you need to understand what I'm admitting I've never done before. Choice is harder than building because it requires surrender. When you're building, you're in control. You make the decisions. You course correct. You iterate. You fail and you learn and you try again. But when you choose someone, you're putting control into someone else's hands. You're saying what you need matters, what you feel matters. Your happiness is now as important as my vision. And for someone like me, that's not just difficult, it's revolutionary. I've been thinking about what real choice looks like. Not the choice of commitment. I've made those commitments before, but the choice to actually show up differently. To reorganize your life around another person's presence. To let their rhythms matter as much as your ambitions. To wake up and ask yourself, not what can I accomplish today, but how can I be present today? That reorganization is not something you can fake. People can sense immediately, whether you're actually choosing them or whether you're just trying to fit them into the spaces around your real priorities. They can feel the difference between someone who wants them and someone who has decided they need them. And I think that's what I've been missing. That distinction between want and need, between accommodation and actual choice. For a long time, I thought needing someone was weakness. I thought it meant I hadn't achieved enough independence. I thought it meant I was compromised. But I've come to understand that the strongest thing a person can do is need another person and admit it. It's not weakness. It's the opposite. It's the willingness to let someone matter enough that their absence would actually hurt you. When you've built your whole identity around being self-sufficient, around not needing anything from anyone, around being the problem solver instead of the person with problems, admitting need is terrifying. It means you're not invulnerable anymore. It means you can be hurt. It means you're not in control. And all of those things are true, and they're also exactly what makes love possible. I think about the architecture of a life, built with another person. Not a life where you're both working toward your separate goals and occasionally intersecting, but a life where the goals themselves shift because you're building them together. Where you wake up and think about what would make her happy. Where you make decisions differently because you're no longer only responsible for yourself. Where you measure success not just by what you've created, but by whether you've created a space where she feels genuinely loved. That requires a different kind of intelligence than the kind I'm used to using. It's not analytical intelligence, it's emotional intelligence. It's the ability to read another person not just with your mind, but with your entire presence. It's the capacity to notice when someone is hurting before they tell you. It's the willingness to ask questions you don't already know the answers to. It's the humility to say, I don't understand. Help me understand. I've never been particularly humble. I've always trusted my own judgment more than anyone else's. And that's served me well in business, but it's destroyed me in relationships. Because relationships require you to be wrong sometimes. They require you to admit that your way of seeing things is not the only way. They require you to value someone else's perspective as much as your own, even when your perspective is backed by logic and evidence and years of being right about how to solve problems. The woman I'm thinking about, the one I'm trying to figure out how to choose properly, she would demand that from me. She would not let me hide behind my accomplishments. She would not accept my presence only when it's convenient. She would ask me to show up as a full person, not a vision with a body attached. And that terrifies me, because I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of presence. I don't know if I can turn off the part of my brain that's always planning the next move long enough to actually be with someone in the moment. But what if I learned? What if I actually committed to learning the way I've learned to build rockets and companies and technologies? What if I approached love with the same rigor and attention that I bring to everything else? What if I treated the architecture of a relationship with the same care I treat the architecture of a spacecraft? The difference would be fundamental. It would mean I show up not because I have time, but because I make time. It would mean I listen not to respond, but to understand. It would mean I remember the small things, not because they're important to my objectives, but because they're important to her. It would mean I'm willing to be wrong. It would mean I'm willing to change. And here's what I'm beginning to understand that kind of choice. The choice to actually show up for another person, that's not less ambitious than building the future. In some ways, it's more ambitious. Because building a company, building a technology, building a vision of the future, those things have been done before. People have done those things. They've succeeded and failed and succeeded again. But building a genuine, reciprocal, deeply connected partnership with another human being, that's the rarest thing. That's what most people never actually accomplish. I'm thinking about the fact that I could die tomorrow. Not in a morbid way, but in the way that anyone who's done dangerous things and pushed the boundaries of what's possible has to think about it. And if I did, what would I want to be remembered for? What would matter? Would it matter that I advanced humanity's presence in space? Of course it would. But would it matter more than the fact that I loved someone fully? That I showed up for them? That I chose them day after day, even when it was hard? I don't think there's any amount of achievement that fills that void. I don't think there's any legacy that compensates for a life lived without that kind of connection. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. I'm tired of the story that says you have to choose between greatness and love, between ambition and connection. What if you didn't have to choose? What if those two things could actually strengthen each other? A man who has learned to love deeply would be a better builder. A man who understands the value of another person's perspective would make better decisions. A man who has practiced vulnerability would have more courage. These things are not opposites, they're complementary. And the fact that I've spent so long treating them as mutually exclusive might be the greatest strategic error I've ever made. So this is where I am now, learning that choice is not a single moment. It's not a declaration you make once and then move on. It's something you make again and again, in small ways, every single day. It's choosing her when you could choose yourself. It's choosing presence when you could choose motion. It's choosing to build a life with someone instead of just building your life in the same space where they happen to be. That's the architecture I'm trying to construct now. And for the first time in my life, I don't know if I'll succeed. And that uncertainty is the most honest thing I've ever felt. There's a particular kind of honesty that only happens in darkness. Not metaphorical darkness, though there's plenty of that too, but actual darkness. When you're lying in bed at night, when you can't see the other person's face clearly, when the world has quieted down enough that you can hear your own thoughts, that's when the truth comes out. That's when you stop performing and start being. I've had so few of those conversations. I've been too busy, too distracted, too afraid of what might come out if I actually let my guard down completely. But I've started to think about what it would be like to have those conversations regularly. To lie next to someone and say the things you're too afraid to say in daylight. To let her see the parts of you that you keep hidden from the world. There are things I would tell her if I had the courage. Things about how lonely it is to be successful. How isolating it is to have everyone want something from you. How empty it feels to be admired by millions of people and still feel completely unseen. How the anxiety never goes away, even when you've proven yourself again and again. How sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night convinced that it's all falling apart. That you've made terrible mistakes, that everything you've built is about to collapse. Those are the conversations that matter. Not the ones where you talk about ideas or strategies or visions of the future, but the ones where you admit that you're afraid, where you say, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm enough. Where you let someone comfort you instead of always being the one providing the comfort. I think about what it would mean to have a woman who actually knew me. Not the public version of me, but the private one. The one who doubts, the one who gets angry, the one who sometimes feels like he's performing his own life instead of actually living it. The one who wonders if all of this matters. The one who realizes, sometimes in the middle of an important meeting, that he's completely alone and no amount of achievement can change that. That kind of knowing requires trust. Deep, fundamental trust. The kind where you believe that someone will still choose you even after they've seen the worst parts. That they'll still want to be near you even after you've disappointed them. That they'll hold your secrets the way you would hold theirs. That they won't use your vulnerabilities against you or spread them around or diminish you because of them. I don't know if I've ever actually trusted anyone like that. I've trusted people to do their jobs. I've trusted people to execute my vision. But I've never trusted anyone with my actual heart. I've never said, here's the most fragile part of me, please don't destroy it, because the risk felt too great. Because I couldn't guarantee the outcome. Because I needed to maintain the illusion that I was fine. That I didn't need anything. That I was complete without anyone else. But I'm starting to understand that illusion has been very expensive. It's cost me relationships. It's cost me moments that could have been real instead of performed. It's cost me the experience of actually being known by another person in the way that only happens when you let your guard down completely. There's a woman I think about in these dark hours. I don't know if she would be willing to have these conversations with me. I don't know if she's still waiting or if she's moved on to someone who could show up for her the way she deserved. I don't know if what I'm learning now is too late to be useful, but I know that if I had the chance, I would tell her everything. I would sit in the darkness and say the things that have been locked inside me for years. I would tell her about the weight of expectations, how it feels to be a certain age and realize that you've optimized your life for success at the expense of everything that actually makes life worth living. How you can have everything the world says you should want and still feel like something essential is missing. How the achievement never quite fills the hole inside you because the hole was never really about achievement. I would tell her about the times I chose work over her and how I've replayed those choices 1,000 times since, trying to figure out how I could have been so stupid. How I thought that explaining my reasons would make it okay, when what she really needed was for me to just show up. How I learned too late that presence is a form of love, and absence is a form of abandonment, no matter how important the thing you're absent for seems. I would tell her about the dreams I have where I'm successful at everything except the thing that actually matters, where I've built empires but lost the woman I loved because I couldn't figure out how to love her back in a way that worked. How those dreams wake me up in a cold sweat, and I lie there in the darkness and think about what I would trade to go back and do it differently. I would tell her that I'm not the same person I was when I was running so hard that I couldn't hear what anyone was trying to tell me, that something has shifted, that I've started to understand that the future I'm building is not actually interesting to me anymore if it's a future I'm building alone, that I would rather build something smaller with her than something enormous without her. And I would ask her questions, real questions, not the kind where I already know what I think the answer should be, but the kind where I'm genuinely curious about her thoughts, her feelings, her perspective. I would ask her what she needs from me. I would ask her what she's been waiting for. I would ask her if there's still time, if she could still imagine a future with me, knowing everything she knows about who I am and how broken I might be. The darkness is when you can be honest about these things, because you don't have to see the other person's reaction clearly. You can feel their presence next to you, hear their breathing, sense their attention, but you don't have to watch their face while you're revealing yourself. There's a mercy in that, a permission to say the things you've been too afraid to say in the light. I think about what would happen if I actually had that conversation. What would happen if I said all of this out loud to the right person? Would she believe me? Would she think I was finally being real, or would she think this was just another performance, another attempt to manipulate her into giving me what I wanted? Would she be willing to take the risk of believing that I've actually changed, that I'm actually ready? Those are the questions that keep me awake in the dark, and I don't have answers to them. I only know that I need to try, that I need to have the courage to say the things I've never said, that I need to show up in the way I should have been showing up all along, that I need to let someone know, not through grand gestures or public declarations, but in the quiet of an ordinary moment, that they matter more to me than anything else I could possibly accomplish. Because here's what I've learned in the darkness. You don't get to choose when you'll be ready. You don't get to optimize your way to the perfect time to be vulnerable. You either do it now, or you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had. And I'm done wondering. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending that I don't need anyone. In the darkness, alone with my own thoughts, I'm finally admitting the truth. I need her. I need the connection. I need the presence. I need to be known by another person in the way that only happens when you stop running and actually let yourself be found. There's a moment that comes when you stop running. Not gradually like you're slowing down, but suddenly like you've hit a wall you didn't see coming. That moment changes everything. It reorganizes your entire understanding of what matters, and once it happens, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending that the motion was the point. I've had that moment. It happened quietly, without fanfare, in a way that the world would never notice, but I noticed, and it shifted the entire architecture of how I think about my future. I was in a meeting, important, strategic, the kind where the decisions made would affect millions of people. And in the middle of explaining something complex, I caught myself. I realized I was performing again. I was being the version of myself that I thought I needed to be, and the actual version of me was watching from somewhere inside, completely disconnected from what was happening. And I thought about how much of my life has been like that. How much of it has been me watching myself love instead of actually living? That's when I understood that I don't want to arrive at the end of my life and realize that I spent the whole thing watching from the outside. I don't want to be a ghost in my own existence. I don't want to be so focused on building a future that I completely miss the present that's happening right now. So I'm making a different choice. Not a grand gesture, not a public declaration, but a real internal commitment to show up differently, to be present, to choose the person who matters over the achievement that's calling. To recognize that the greatest thing I could ever do might be simply learning how to love someone fully. I think about what that looks like practically. It looks like turning off my phone sometimes. It looks like making plans and keeping them, even when something comes up that seems more urgent. It looks like listening to understand instead of listening to solve. It looks like admitting when I'm wrong instead of explaining why I was right. It looks like being willing to be ordinary, to be unremarkable, to be just a person sitting with another person in the quiet. Those things sound simple, but they're not. They require a fundamental reorganization of how I prioritize my time. They require me to believe that presence is more valuable than productivity. They require me to trust that the world will not fall apart if I'm not constantly solving problems. They require me to let go of the belief that I'm the only one who can fix things. And here's the thing that scares me the most. They require me to believe that I'm enough just as a person, not as an innovator or visionary or problem solver, but as a human being. That I have value simply because I exist, not because of what I've accomplished. That someone could love me not for my potential or my achievements, but for who I actually am right now, with all my flaws and limitations and brokenness. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not sure I fully believe that yet. I'm not sure I've completely let go of the belief that I need to earn love through achievement. But I'm learning. I'm trying. And I think that's what matters. I think that's what counts. Not that I've already figured it out, but that I've stopped running long enough to try. I've been thinking about what I would say to the woman who might be willing to take this journey with me. What I would tell her if I actually had the chance to start over, to do this differently. And I think I would say something like this. I know I've disappointed you. I know I've chosen the wrong things at the wrong times. I know I've asked you to wait for me when I should have been showing up for you. I know I've been absent in the ways that mattered most. And I can't undo any of that. But I can tell you what I've learned in the time since I stopped long enough to actually think about my life. I've learned that you were right to leave if you left. I've learned that you were right to set boundaries if you set them. I've learned that what you needed from me was not complicated or unreasonable. You needed me to simply be present, to choose you, to let you matter. Those are not difficult things, they're just things that I wasn't capable of doing at the time. But I'm learning. And if you're willing, I would like the chance to try again. Not to go back to what we had, because that was built on a foundation of absence and sacrifice on your part, but to build something new. Something where we're both choosing each other. Something where presence is the baseline, not the exception. Something where you don't have to wonder if you matter, because I'm showing you every single day that you do. I can't promise you that I won't make mistakes. I can't promise you that I'll be perfect at this. I've spent most of my life being driven by ambition, and I'm going to have to learn to be driven by connection instead. That's not an easy transition. It might take me time. There might be moments where I slip back into old patterns, but what I can promise you is that I will keep trying. That I will choose you again and again. That I will learn to love you in the way you deserve to be loved. I'm thinking a lot about legacy these days. Not the kind that's written in history books or measured in companies built or technologies created, but the kind that lives in another person's heart. The kind where someone can say, he loved me well. He showed up for me. He chose me. That's the legacy I want now. That's what I'm working toward. That's the future I'm building. It's a smaller future than the ones I've been building before. It's less impressive by the world's standards. It won't change how humans live or where they go or what they believe is possible. But it will change me. And maybe that's the most important change of all. Maybe that's the one that actually matters. I've realized something else as I've been thinking about all of this. The woman who could love me now, after everything, after seeing who I actually am, that woman would be extraordinary. She would have to be brave. She would have to be willing to risk being hurt again. She would have to believe that people can change, even when they've proven they couldn't before. She would have to trust that my words mean something now when they didn't before. She would have to have the kind of faith that doesn't make logical sense. That's the kind of woman worth building a life with. That's the kind of woman who knows her own value and won't settle for less than she deserves. That's the kind of woman who loves fiercely, but also loves herself fiercely. And I would be honored to be chosen by her. I would be grateful every single day. I would show up. I would be present. I would choose her. So this is what I want to say to you, if you're listening. If you're the woman I'm thinking about, or if you're someone else entirely who has been waiting for someone to finally learn how to choose you properly, I see you. I see how hard you've been willing to work. I see how much you've been willing to sacrifice. I see how strong you are. And I want you to know that you don't have to wait anymore if you don't want to. But if you do, if you're willing to give this one more chance, to believe that I've actually learned something important, to trust that this time could be different, then I want to tell you that I'm ready. Not perfect, not completely transformed, but genuinely ready. I'm ready to stop running. I'm ready to build something real. I'm ready to choose you, day after day, in the small ways that actually matter. The future I'm building now is not on another planet. It's not in a company or a technology. It's right here, in this present moment, with you. It's in the quiet conversations in the dark. It's in the ordinary Tuesday nights where we're just sitting together. It's in the commitment to show up, to listen, to be present, to let another person matter as much as my own dreams. I don't know if I'll get it right. I don't know if I have it in me to completely transform from who I've been to who I need to become. But I know that I'm going to try. I know that I'm going to give everything I have to learning how to love you well. And I know that the greatest achievement of my life will be if you can look at me one day and say, yes, he chose me. He still chooses me. He will keep choosing me. That's the future I'm building now. That's the vision that matters to me. And if you're willing to build it with me, then I'm finally completely ready to stop running and start arriving.